Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Amma ba'du. The honorable examiners of this thesis examination, good afternoon, Mr. Dr. Andus Buhari, MPD, as the first examiner, and then Mr. Muhammad Taufik Ihsan, MPD, as the second examiner, and then Mr. Nuardi, MED, as the third examiner, and then Mr. Idam Shaputra, MED, as the fourth examiner. In this special occasion, I'm Nadia Pohan, a student of English Education Department, State Faculty of Education, State Islamic University of Sultan Syarif Qasim Riau. I would like to thank to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala for giving us the help to be able to pretending this thesis examination, and then I would like to thank to Mr. Dr. Andus Haji Sutarmo MAG as my supervisor, and then I would like to thank to all of the examiners who have given me an opportunity to present my thesis with the title "The Correlation Between Listening Comprehension and Speaking Ability" of student SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru. Well, in this globalization era, English is such a need to learn because it language of trade, education, and technology. So in this country itself, English English is learned English is learned as a foreign language. So the process of a foreign language learning starts from listening. Listening is an important role in receiving information, and what comes after listening is speaking. So speaking often becomes the icon of students' success in learning language. An experience of the researcher when she attended the fifth semester, when the lecturer asked the students how they can get how they can get when the teacher asked the student how they can get the good pronunciation in speaking English, 10 out of 15 participants answered that they often listen to English song, and 5 others is answer that they often watching to English drama or English drama or English movie. So the researcher assumes that the researcher assumed that the student who speak English fluently is the result of good listening skill. But in the contrary, there are some students who have good score at listening subject, but they do not speak as much as the students who are investigated before. So about the problem of the research, there are some problems they identify in this research. Is first is what makes students have difficulty in speaking, and then what should be improved so that students have better speaking ability, and then what is the effect of listening comprehension on students' speaking ability. Because there are some problem in this research, the researcher need to limit the problems to pay more attention to the specific problems. So the researcher will focus on the correlation between listening comprehension and speaking ability. The formulation of this research is there any significant correlation between listening comprehension and speaking ability? The objective of the research is to find out the significant correlation between listening comprehension and speaking ability. And why researcher choosing this title is because the first is this title is relevant to the researcher status as a student of English education department, and then this title needs to be researcher because there is still a lack student interest in learning English, and the teaching methods are effectiveness and difficult to attract students' attention. Well, now talking about the theoretical framework. So to listen well, students have to comprehend the meaning of the spoken language. To comprehend means uh, to to understand completely, not only knowing the meaning of the spoken language, but also knowing the context of the spoken language. Richard stated that listening and listening comprehension are synonymous. So, from the two terms, listening and comprehension, uh, lead the researcher to define listening from the two terms from the meaning of two terms, listening and listening comprehension, leads the researcher to define listening comprehension is the way of completely understanding completely the spoken language through listening, and then making up the meaning of the language being spoken by the speakers. There are two types of listening comprehension. The first is one-way listening. Uh, it uh, it like it is the process. It is a process of the information is being transmitted uh, like the activity of listening to the material that given by the teacher. The second type is two-way listening. This process is this this process is suggest when people listen to their interlocutor to reply them in conversation. There are some problems in listening comprehension. The first is a problem in new system, and then problem in new vocabularies, and then problem in uh, testing of listening comprehension. Talking about the speaking, all of all four skills, speaking uh, of all four skills, but listening, writing, reading, speaking. Speaking seems intuitively speaking the most important because speaking is not the correct skill, the correct skill. Uh, it cannot stand alone because um, some complex activity such as vocabulary mastery, grammar competence, comprehension, input of language, phonology, and pronunciation are included. So the successful speaking activity characterized as first, learners talk a lot, and then participation in event, and then motivation is high, and the last one is language is of an acceptable level. So there are some problems in speaking. There is inadequate vocabulary, and then inadequate control of grammar, lack of fluency, shyness, and lack of encouragement. Well, listening has the contribution and correlation to build speaking ability. Listening is a gate that will get students to speak. Thus, listening is the way of comprehending speech. The messages are the messages that are processed are spoken language, which is produced by the speakers. That is why listening comprehension correlates to the speaking ability. So, the study of correlation between listening comprehension and speaking abilities um, has been researched by the some previous researcher. Um, some of them is there are Yuni and Riani Pinem, and then Muhammad Shahrul Hadi, and then Darul Ihsan, in, and also Darul Ihsan. Well, the theoretical framework, Nations and Newton's theory, listening is the natural precursor to speaking skill. Another step is from Woods that good speakers are the speakers who can interact with the interlocutor. So, the researcher assumes that building comprehension in language learning is a paramount thing in learning language. So the assumption of this research is the researcher assumed that the better student listening comprehension, the better their ability in speaking will be. And the hypothesis of this research is if alternative hypothesis, it means there is significant correlation between two variables, and then null hypothesis or HO or HO, it means that there is no correlation between two variables. So, well, this study was conducted through quantitative method, and the design is correlational study. This research was conducted at SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru, and the range time is from the first researcher proposed the research until she finished it in June 12 in 2024. The subject of this research is second grade students at SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru, and the object is the correlation between listening comprehension and speaking abilities. About the population of this research is one class of second grade students that consists of 20 students. They were 11 males and 9 females. So because the number of the participants in this research uh, is small, so the researcher used total sampling. So the writer took all of the our participants to be the sample of this research. The instrument of this research is listening assessment and speaking test. For technique of collecting data, the research used speaking test and taking a video. In analyzing the data, there are three steps the researcher used. The first is finding the number of correlation, finding the number of correlation using formula which developed by core person, and then finding the significance between two variables and interpret the index of R correlation and product moment. Well, the data described based on the research that had been conducted at SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru. So this chapter is intended to answer the question from the of the problem in this research. There is there any significant correlation between listening comprehension and speaking abilities of students at SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru? So the researcher conduct a test. It was a speaking test. So the speaking test was conducted by the researcher using listening and audio, and then demonstration. So the researcher gave an audio, and the participants uh, were asked to listen in 5 minutes, and then demonstrate in front of the class. So after the researcher collect the score of the students' performance, um, and then the researcher um, find out the descriptive statistic using SPSS. So, and the result is second grade students of SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru have a good enough in listening comprehension. It can be seen that the most of the students gain 66, uh, in which score 66 is characterized as C, or enough level. Next, about speaking score. To collecting the score of listening test. To collecting the score of speaking test, there were two assessors. Who assessed the speaking test. The assessors is the researcher and her friend. After assessing the student speaking performance, the scores were counted by this formula, and after and after have been calculated, and the researcher um, uh, the researcher will the researcher collect the final score. So after that, the researcher um, search the research the search the researcher search the descriptive statistic using the SPSS. So the result is, and the result of search using SPSS is some of the students at SMP Islam Al-Azhar 37 Pekanbaru have good in speaking test. It can be seen that most of the students obtain the score in 79, which with the score 79 is characterized as B, or good level. Well, next about the data analysis. To analyze the data, the researcher used R product moment by car person. So the result find is find R count is 0.97. So to make sure the calculation, the researcher calculation manually. So the researcher using the SPSS. So the result of two the result of those two calculation is manual calculation and SPSS calculation is the same. It means there is no mismatch in the process of the calculating by the researcher. So after finding the recount, the next step to do is to find out the significance of the variables by calculating Rxy is tested by the significant formula. Then from the formula, uh, the result is T count is 20.6. And then before the researcher testing the T count, the writer made two hypotheses of significance. There are uh, alternative hypothesis. So it means there is a significant correlation between two variables. And then HO, or null hypothesis, it means there is no significant correlation between two variables. So the formulation of the test is, if T count is bigger than T table, it means that the null hypothesis is rejected and there is significant correlation. But if T count is lower than T table, it means the null hypothesis is accepted and there is no significant correlation. So next is to find out the degree of freedom. So from this formula, the result is the degree of freedom is 18. From degree of freedom, 18 is obtained. The table one of 1% is 2.88. So it indicates that T table is bigger than T count is bigger than T table, in which 20.7 is bigger than 2.88. Well, now talking about the data interpretation. So in the table of the significance shows if degree of freedom value is 18, while the table of significance 1% is 0.56. So based on the score of recount 0.97, so it indicates that the score of recount is bigger than retable, in which 0.97 is bigger than 0.56. So it means that alternative hypothesis is accepted. In other words, there is the significant correlation between two variables. To interpret the gravity of recount 0.97, the table of R product moment shows that correlation value is on the very high, in which between 0.90 until 1.00. Well, according to the finding of this research, the researcher draws a conclusion that speaking ability is correlates or influenced by influence to this speaking listening comprehension. So good listening skills are essential for effective speaking. So students with stronger listening comprehension or listening comprehension will also speak more effectively. Well, I think enough for my explanation about my thesis. And the last is Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.